It looks like we are live, ladies and gentlemen, and so that means that it is indeed time for This Week in Jihad. Can you not hear me now? A minute ago you could hear me. Well, it looks like we're going to have another wonderful technical difficulties show. I haven't changed any settings over here, David, so I don't know why you would not be able to hear me. Can I hear you? No? Well, sorry. Let's see. How about now? Hello? Oh? Well, sorry, ladies and gentlemen. David? Hello? Nothing?
I heard you once I got off my headphone. Isn't that weird?
Yes. But you can hear me now?
I might be getting an echo now, but first you couldn't hear me through your headphones, and now I can't hear you through my headphones.
You know what it is, David?
What?
The jinn.
The spirit.
Anyway, I just wanted to point out to you, ladies and gentlemen, that I did not appropriate. This is, of course, the famed David Wood. I'm Robert Spencer. We are This Week in Jihad. And I did not appropriate David's famed introduction, TikTok Time to Rock, this week. I was feeling a little guilty about that. And I thought that I would throw the floor open to all of you, our loyal viewers, all 19 of you, that perhaps you could tell me a good introduction for this show in the comments to this broadcast, should we have a broadcast tonight. But right now, that's touch and go. Will it happen? Will it not? Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. David, you're with us?
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, I was totally fine with Robert stealing TikTok Time to Rock, because I steal his stuff all the time, and I never, ever get credit for anything. Well, I mean, people crack up because I'll make a video and I'll refer to jihadis as misunderstanders of Islam and so on. I totally stole that from Robert.
That was mine.
Tons of stuff from Robert over the years.
Hey, if you lost the headphones, can I lose them, or would that mess everything up?
It's basically, sometimes it's okay with no headphones, and sometimes you start getting an echo. If they start getting an echo, I just do it. I do it to be safe, to avoid the problem. But let me try and click back on external headphones and see what happens.
What do you think of that, Dave? It started with "May Allah be with us." I don't know. I'm not sure that's winning.
The weirdest thing. It would be weird to happen to one person, but it happened to both of us.
Okay, how about now? Anything?
I don't hear an echo. It would be on them because I'm hearing you through my computer. Other people will be hearing both of us through the problem. The problem with the echo is people hear you through the program, but they also hear you through my microphone, and so you can get an echo.
Well, let's see. Are you going to sound like the voice of Allah again, or am I? I don't know.
And sometimes it can happen like periodically, like it'll happen every like several minutes or something like that. But okay, most of the time.
Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for these technical problems. I am not a technical guy. Bad echo, okay. Bid echo, even worse.
This is weird though, because this is one. It's never happened to me that a pair of headphones stops working. Like the computer can't make it go through. But to happen to both of us, that's nuts.
How about now?
People were saying I'm the one who's echoing, so that should solve the problem.
Okay, David sounds like Allah again. David always sounds like Allah. Now, ladies and gentlemen, enough tomfoolery. We are a bit late already, and we're hoping to actually have a show this week. So thank you for your patience. Those of you who are here, 15 This Week in Jihad listeners cannot be wrong. Now, we have, of course, one huge jihad story this week, and that is, of course, the story that everyone has heard about. You don't even need to go to jihadwatch.org to see that Salman Rushdie, after 33 years with a death fatwa hanging over his head, has been stabbed He is seriously injured, although reports are that he's recovering. There's an awful lot that can and should be said about that, so I will send over to David for initial impressions.
People are saying it's okay now, but I wasn't speaking, so I just want to verify. But I have to say, man, I was 12 when he wrote the Satanic Verses. Had you said anything about? Were you saying anything about Islam back then?
I was actually. It's interesting that you say that because I was involved in some things that involved the Satanic Verses and Salman Rushdie at that time, but it was on a very small scale in the local area where I lived, actually in the Bronx. And so there are very few people who would even remember our discussions about the fatwa and its implications, but that was one of the first things that I was doing about Islam way back in 1989.
And it's kind of funny, isn't it, that like this writer just back, because now everyone's blasting away. There are a ton of people who are blasting away at Islam right now,
Yes.
online and books and so on. Back in the 80s, I mean, no one was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So for this guy just comes out of nowhere and, hey, you know what? I'm going to write a book that brings up one of the most embarrassing moments in the history of Islam, the Satanic Verses, where Muhammad admittedly delivered revelations from Satan, promoting polytheism, told his followers they can pray to 3 pagan goddesses, and that these pagan bird goddesses, these cranes, can carry their prayers to Allah. See, guys, keep in mind in Islam, Allah's not omnipresent, right? That's why in the hadith it will say to hear your prayers, Allah has to come down. He has to come down to the lowest heaven. He comes down and, oh, okay, now I'm down here. Let me listen, right? Well, the alternative is for someone else to carry your prayers up to Allah. So, as messenger.
Especially bird goddesses are good for that.
Yeah.
The exalted cranes.
Oh, perfect. You've got these bird goddesses. And then it's interesting because you see how Muhammad's desires influenced his revelations, even according to the story, right? Even according to this story, the earliest versions of this story have Muhammad really sad and brokenhearted because his tribe rejects him and doesn't accept Islam. So he's longing for some sort of revelation that will draw them in. And then one day he gets the revelation he's looking for. He delivers the revelation saying that Muslims can now pray to Allat, Alusa, and Manat. And according to the story, Muhammad delivers the verses. He bows down to them. His followers bow down, and then his pagan tribe, the Quraysh, bows down in honor of this revelation in Surah 53 of the Quran. And then a little later, Muhammad comes back and says, sorry, the devil made me do it. Satan tricked me. But this is so embarrassing because, one, it means Muhammad couldn't tell the difference between a revelation from God and a revelation from Satan. Two, it means that Muhammad committed the unpardonable sin, like the worst sin you can commit. And actually had pagans bowing down in honor of a revelation promoting prayers to pagan goddesses and so on. 3, according to Deuteronomy 18, their favorite passage from the Old Testament to quote as far as prophecies about Muhammad, the number one passage they go to is Deuteronomy 18:18, where God says that he's going to send a prophet like Moses. But just 2 verses later, Deuteronomy 18:20, God says, if a prophet delivers a revelation that didn't actually come from God, or if he speaks in the names of other gods and goddesses, that prophet shall die. So Muhammad would have been sentenced to death by Moses for delivering the Satanic Verses. So for the first basically 1 to 2 centuries of Islam, that was taken for granted. Later, they start editing the story out until you get down to our age and Muslims act like, no, this is just a fiction. It's all a forgery. And then Salman Rushdie comes in there and just like throws it in everyone's faces, the story of the Satanic Verses, but like a fictionalized book that includes parts of the story. But and so they were so mad about that. They had to, again, I was 12 and this guy decided to poke that hornet's nest.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that when I was in graduate school and first studying Islam, you must have been about 6 if you were 12. Anyway, I first read the Quran, first studied Islam in graduate school, and nobody ever mentioned this satanic verses incident. And when Salman Rushdie came along and this happened, what really surprised me was that this is an actual story from Islamic tradition. And a lot of people still have no idea of that. But it's in Zamakhshari, which goes back to the 12th century. It is in the Islamic sources. I have to emphasize this. This is not something the enemies of Islam concocted, although a lot of Islamic apologists like to say that today. Anyway, we got a lot of dumb infidel stories coming out of the Salman Rushdie incident, but you would seem to be looking for a book there.
I actually have a book. I don't know if it's on this shelf because I was repacking this shelf, but where could it be? Wait, I wanted to keep it on this shelf because I wanted to remind myself to read it. I read Shihab Ahmed. Have you heard of him?
I don't think so.
It was Princeton and Harvard. He graduated with his PhD from one, and then he taught at the other. I think he graduated from Princeton and then taught at Harvard. But he wrote a book. I mean, he wrote his doctoral dissertation on the Satanic verses.
Oh yeah.
Where for his doctoral dissertation, he translated 37 sources on the Satanic verses, right? And then shows how the story was gradually watered down over time.
Mm-hmm.
At first, the story is Satan delivers the revelation to Muhammad in the same way that Gabriel does. Muhammad doesn't know the difference and so on. Later, they have Satan imitating his voice and so on. By the time you get to Bukhari, which Shihab doesn't even include, by the time you get to Bukhari, all the pagans bow down in honor of Surah 53, but they don't explain why, right?
Yes.
It's just a great mystery why they did it. But then posthumously, so he died, but posthumously they published a book on the Satanic verses that now he had 50 sources. So I read his doctoral dissertation, but I wanted to read the new version where he has 13 extra sources.
Oh, I got to get that.
Verses.
Oh,
But
yeah.
can you imagine 50 sources and Muslims? Oh, no, it was all made up. It was all made up, really.
You know,
50 sources.
there's so many incidents of this, David, where we have Islamic apologists in the West counting on the ignorance of Western non-Muslims. And so they know that 99.99% of Western non-Muslims do not read the Islamic sources or the writings of so-called Islamophobes, and so they don't have any idea. Oh, terrific.
Got it. Before orthodoxy, the Satanic verses in early Islam.
I got to get this book.
Orthodoxy. He calls it before orthodoxy because he points out that the original doctrine is called Ismat al-Anbiya. Ismat al-Anbiya, and that is the doctrine of Allah's protection of the prophets. He points out that in the first 2 centuries of Islam, the doctrine of Ismat al-Anbiya meant that Allah is going to protect prophets from persisting in error, right?
Oh.
He's going to protect them from persisting in it. So a prophet can mess up, do something really, really messed up and stupid, and then Allah will bring him out of that and have him apologize. So given that doctrine, the story of the Satanic verses was fine to them, right? Because, it fit perfectly with the doctrine. Muhammad messed up, Satan duped him, and then Allah rescued him out of it. But they point out that, in the 2nd century of Islam, the doctrine of Allah's protection of the prophets changed so that it came to mean that Allah will protect a prophet from all major sin. Well, telling Muslims they can pray to pagan goddesses is about as major as you can get in Islam. So that was no longer acceptable. And so it had to be weeded out in light of the theology. So isn't that interesting that history gets modified to bring it in line with their changing theology? And so that's why he calls it before orthodoxy. Before modern orthodoxy, before these doctrines solidified, it was perfectly acceptable to tell it. And then now Muslims can't believe it, even though it obviously happened.
Beautiful, beautiful. Anyway, got a few stories about Rushdie. Of course, dumb infidels in the first place. The New York Times reported on Friday that the stabbing had taken place and added a motive was unclear. Major Eugene J. Stanishevsky of the New York State Police identified the suspect as Hadi Matar, a 24-year-old New Jersey man, because obviously that's the most important aspect of this man, is this man's identity in light of his stabbing Rushdie, that he's from New Jersey. But he said late Friday afternoon at a news conference that there was no indication of a motive. Now, I don't think there's ever been a stabbing that has had more indication of a motive than the stabbing of Salman Rushdie. Ever in history. For 33 years, it's been crystal clear why anybody would attack Salman Rushdie. And then when it happens, we have the New York State Police and the New York Times saying, we don't know what's going on here. Why would anybody want to harm this cuddly little novelist?
One of life's great mysteries.
It is. It's an enduring and astonishing mystery. Meanwhile, in the Islamic Republic of Iran, at least according to the Associated Press, people were very happy about the news. Reza Amiri, a 27-year-old delivery man, said, I don't know Salman Rushdie, but I am happy to hear that he was attacked since he insulted Islam. This is the fate for anybody who insults sanctities. Now, where would he get this idea? 27-year-old delivery man living in the Islamic Republic of Iran, which fashions all of its laws after Sharia wherever possible. I mean, probably not traffic laws, but just about every other law is based on Islamic law. And this guy somehow gets the idea that somebody who insulted Islam, it's good for him to have been stabbed. And yet in the West, in the United States, we constantly are told that Islamic law is completely peaceful and benign and has no incompatibility whatsoever with Western values. So what is the disconnect here? How does this happen, David?
This just in from the mainstream media. Millions of people are celebrating the stabbing and attack on Salman Rushdie, but journalists and politicians can find absolutely no reason for so many millions of people to agree.
The motive is unclear.
Searching for a motive. Did you see Michaela Peterson? She posted something from TikTok. She shared something from TikTok, and it was just on one of the. It was from some TikTok video where it was announced that Salman Rushdie was stabbed, or showed the guy going into court or something like that. And it was like endless comments as they're popping up, celebrating the guy and telling him what a hero he is. And it just and she said something like, this is why the one thing she's scared to talk about is Islam. And it's just interesting because it's like we've been constantly told, as you pointed out, that Islam's wonderful and peaceful and benign and so on. But the thing that's really the mantra for the past couple decades has been your famous saying, tiny minority of extremists. Mm-hmm. And then you have something like this happen, and it's like the tiny minority seem to be the ones who are saying, hey, let's not celebrate this. That's the tiny minority.
Yes.
Because it seems far more common for people to be celebrating this. And even the people who disagree, because you do have Muslims who think, hey, this is a different time and so on, and we need to learn to get along with other people and so on. Even they don't like speaking out about it much, because then they start getting called unbelievers and apostates and heretics and so on. And so they just have to, generally be quiet. And so you just have this people celebrating it, and people don't know what to do here. Like, we keep trying to say that this is just a tiny minority, and it doesn't look like that. It's like when Egypt came out with its with that Pew Research poll on religious views in Egypt, and it was something like 90% or something like that approved of the killing of apostates. It's like, oopsie, what happened to that tiny minority? Because
yes.
You'd be thinking like, 99.99. If you just listen to the media for the past 2 decades, you'd say like 99.999% of Muslims, want no part of this, and they hate this. And then you start looking and it's, wait a minute, 90% are pro this? That's creepy.
It is creepy. And there's more. Islamic Republic of Iran, of course, they were thrilled. They said they had nothing to do with it, but he had it coming. He deserved it. And it's his fault that it happened. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because that's exactly what the New York Times or the Washington Post would say if anything were to happen to either you or me, or anybody else who criticizes jihad and Sharia. that it would be our fault. They wouldn't say these are courageous exponents of the freedom of speech. It would sound just like the Islamic Republic, where they said, Allah willing, we will celebrate Salman Rushdie going to hell soon. Bravo to this courageous and duty-conscious man who attacked the apostate and depraved Salman Rushdie in New York. So that's the Iranian press. Sounds just like our press. Although our press, actually, these days, is full of material about how important it is to uphold the freedom of speech. And I find that kind of ironic in light of the fact that they slam anybody who does so when they actually do it here. But Rushdie shares their political bent, and so it seems as if it's okay in his case. Hadi Matar had been in touch with the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, by the way. Anyway, yes.
No, I just wanted to along the lines that you were just talking about there. Because you had various world leaders, including Justin Trudeau, blasting the very thought of attacking someone like Salman Rushdie over mere words and mere books and so on. And but all these people who are standing up for freedom of speech right now. A month from now, when I relaunch like Muhammad's Boom Boom Room or something in response, if something like that gets brought up to them, or cartoons or whatever it may be, then they're once again going to be on the side that, free speech is not hate speech, blah 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 blah, and it's just the reason it's insane is you have precisely one peaceful way to deal with people who are saying, if you do this, we're going to kill you over it, right? There are all kinds of violent ways to deal with people who say, if you do this, then we're going to kill you over it. You could get violent in return. But the only peaceful way to deal with people who are saying, if you criticize Muhammad or make fun of Muhammad or make fun of the Quran, we're going to brutally murder you. The only peaceful thing you can do in response is make fun of Muhammad and make fun of the Quran. Right? Assuming you want some sort of solution. If you just want to ignore it and leave it to the next generation, then you can just ignore it. If you want to actually do something to make them stop killing, to protect their prophet, you kind of have to make fun of their prophet and their book until they get used to it and stop killing, because so many people are doing it. And so the only peaceful solution you have to what's going on is what we're doing. And yet we're the ones who get blasted. And so all these people who pretend like they care about freedom of speech and freedom of expression and so on, it's only when it's convenient, and they have to, because a guy that, based on everything they've said for the years, has it coming, because he's making fun of Muhammad and the Quran. He has it coming, right? That's the impression you get from these guys. And then as soon as he's stabbed, oh no, we're champions of freedom of expression. You bunch of lying cowards. No, you're not.
I got that right here. I got it right here, David. The New York Times on Monday saying, this is the New York Times on Monday, the free exchange of information and ideas, the lifeblood of a liberal society, is daily becoming more constricted. And now I'm hearing myself come back. Do you hear it?
Nope, I don't.
All right, if you don't, we'll see what they say. Let's see. Anybody?
Well, again, I'm hearing you through this program and not through multiple things.
Whatever. Anyway, the New York Times says, the heart of the Rushdie case is being able to say that we, as writers, as novelists, as thinkers, can absolutely take on any issue we want in our works. And that includes Islam. Now, back in 2015, we had the Muhammad Art Exhibit and Cartoon Contest. Pamela Geller and I in Garland, Texas. We were attacked by jihadis who were killed by our security team. And the New York Times said, the Muhammad Art Exhibit and Contest in Garland, Texas was not really about free speech. It was an exercise in bigotry and hatred, posing as a blow for freedom. Now, what's the difference exactly? Salman Rushdie mocked Muhammad, and we depicted cartoons of Muhammad and had a contest. There really isn't any difference. Both of us were standing up for the freedom of speech. Both of us were engaging in one's right to criticize or even to mock ideas. So the New York Times is completely arbitrary and inconsistent in this regard, and it always will be.
Yeah, it seems like I mean, it's really sad that journalism is like this, but like, which side is the cool side here, as
Yes.
far as we're concerned? Which side's the cool side? Oh, well, it can't be Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller back in Garland. So yeah, they deserve what they get. Shame on them. Shame on them. Who's the cool side now? Ah, Salman Rushdie. He's the
Oh
he's the
yeah.
cool side. Jihadi was bad, and it's just this is how you guys decide your principles, like
Yep.
your bedrock principles.
That is. It's completely political, really. It's just a left-right thing. But anyway, David, I got so much more. So why don't we go off Rushdie a little bit, and we may have to return to him because I've got so many tabs open as always, and they're completely disorganized as always. Oh yeah, one more thing about Rushdie before we leave him. Hadi Matar, you may have heard. His mom said yesterday or the day before that he took a trip to Lebanon and he came back. He was all angry with her and said, "Why didn't you raise me as a strict Muslim?" And he had gone to Lebanon, become more religious. He comes back, he stabs Salman Rushdie.
Haven't we heard that like 8,000 times? That similar story right there.
I'm afraid so, yeah. That's an incredibly recurring theme in jihad is that you have a Muslim who's not religious, who lives a secular life, he's drinking, he's doing stuff that's not aligned with Islam, and he gets religion, he decides to turn his life around and be pleasing to Allah, and he goes jihad and does so in order to commit a great good deed that outweighs all his bad deeds. And then the media says, well, see, he wasn't religious. He was drinking. He was going to strip bars. So he's not really a Muslim. But they don't get at all the turnaround and the repentance and the new life. And this is what Hadi Matar seems to have done in striking at Rushdie. Of course, Muhammad said there's no greater deed than jihad. So Hadi Matar's got all these sins. He figures if he goes jihad on Rushdie, then he's got a big, great, good deed to outweigh all his little bad deeds.
Yep.
Okay, let's go to France. I had it here a minute ago. Here it is. 25-year-old man in France. He is a Moroccan in an irregular situation, said the French press, which means he was probably illegally in France, but nobody was making any effort to get him out of the country. He got into an argument with his father and screaming. What was he screaming, David?
Love and peace for all, hatred for none, or Allahu Akbar.
We're going to go with B. Allahu Akbar. It's exactly what he was saying, and he took a kitchen knife and he actually beheaded his 60-year-old father. And then he decided to take a walking around with the severed head in Lyon in France. And that is the story out of France. I think that's the best story out of France this week. Meanwhile, in Britain, not actually in Britain, this was a flight from Cyprus, from Larnaca to Manchester, England. And there was a woman on the flight who got up and started taking off her clothes. And what was she yelling, David?
I gotta go with my bread and butter here, Allahu Akbar.
I don't know how you do it. Really, it's astonishing. You're still 100% on that. She was screaming Allahu Akbar. She charged the cockpit. She said that her parents were in ISIS, and she was overcome by one of the other passengers. And so actually he asked the staff on the plane, the flight attendants, why don't you restrain her? And they said, we are not able to. And he said, well, I am. And he took care of it himself, which is probably increasingly what citizens are going to have to do in many contexts. But in any case, yes.
That was a that was a weird story with her stripping down to her undergarments and stuff and charging. I was like wondering about that because you have multiple possibilities. So one
Yeah.
possibility is she's like totally insane, just like a
Hmm.
random, totally insane person. Two, you have it could be a Muslim who has mental health problems. She could just be
Hmm.
a crazy Muslim.
But there's another
Three, that could
possibility.
actually it could be part of the plan. Like no one's going to dare touch me if I'm almost naked, so they
There's
won't be able
a
to stop me if I'm charging them.
there's a fourth possibility. It reminds me of that guy. I should have gotten his name. The guy in Boulder, Colorado, who went into the supermarket and started stabbing people there last year. And he took off all his clothes and was calmly waiting for the cops. Now, what was it that made him take off his clothes? I think that's clearer. What do you think it was, David?
Uh, Taking off the clothes?
Yeah, there's a
I don't know.
theological reason for it.
Oh, I mean, you've got the stories like with angels not wanting to be around a naked person. I don't know if you're thinking about
I'm
that
not
stuff
thinking about that.
theologically.
This is what I think that has to do with that the heaven paradise is a physical place. As we know, as you just pointed out, Allah is physical, so he has to get close enough to hear the prayers. So paradise is a physical place where these virgins are. And the bodies of the martyrs are not washed. They are buried all bloody because the virgins like that. They think it's kind of an aphrodisiac for them that the martyrs come into paradise all covered with blood. And so he is undressing so that when he gets to paradise, he can immediately get busy. It is all about being ready on the spot. Just like Muhammad Atta on the plane, on 9/11, his luggage was flagged. He wasn't flagged, he was on the flight, but his luggage was not on the flight. And in his luggage was a tux because he had planned to change into fabulous clothes to meet the virgins.
That is interesting because and it shows how different people think differently. Because, I mean, in my head, if I were like going on some, if I were a jihadi and going on some killing spree and wanted to get naked, it would just be like, if I were all naked and bloody, I'm thinking people are going to be way less inclined to tackle me, right? It's like, whoa.
I'm thinking he's going to go into paradise. He's thinking the police are going to kill him, the guy in the supermarket, and so he'll go right to paradise and be ready. Now, what about this
Hang
woman?
on, just be honest here. If you have some guy, in an Adidas, let's say jogging suit, so on, coming at you, that would be one thing. You would be like way more creeped out by some naked bloody guy running at you. I think that'd be way creepier, right?
Well,
Some naked bloody guy screaming Allahu Akbar.
maybe it's a strike terror in the enemies of Allah thing. I don't
I
know.
don't know. I
But
don't know.
I
See, now here we actually have a mystery, right?
That's
The
right.
motives are not the motives are not the mystery. The mystery may be why this person got naked when we can come up with several possibilities and so
There
on.
are
Until
several
the person
possibilities.
explains it. Until the person explains it, we don't know. See, that's a mystery. Journalists, that's what a mystery looks like.
And so this woman, is it possible that she's extrapolating from Islamic paradise, which is totally male oriented, and there's no description of it for women? But she's figuring, well, if it's like that for men, it must be like that for women as well, since after all, the Quran does tell women that if they're righteous, they'll go into paradise, so they must do something there. Maybe she's undressing in anticipation of her heavenly Chippendales. It's possible.
It's it's certainly possible, right?
It's possible.
And I mean, fair is fair, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
hear about the 70 or 72 virgins and so on. There are other passages in the commentaries and so on which say that's like the minimum. That's like
Hmm.
for the loser. That's like for a loser, right? I mean, you could get way more. The cooler you are, and the more people you slaughter in the name of Allah, the more of those virgins you get. And then Allah promises that He's going to give miraculously empowered erections to men so that their penises never go soft, so they can just, one virgin after another. And you say, what happens when you run out of virgins? No, Allah restores their virginity after you take their virginity. He restores their virginity. So every time it's like, having sex with a virgin again. And so it makes sense that a woman would say, hey, maybe it's like that for me too, and maybe I get all these hundreds. I'll get hundreds of dudes lost in that great big brothel in the sky.
Yeah. Now, this in itself is a disproof of Islam. And a lot of people don't think this through. But, Charles de Foucault? He was a Catholic missionary. He went and lived in Algeria, I believe it was, or Libya, in North Africa anyway, in the 19th century. And he ultimately was murdered by jihadis. But he had lived before he went into North Africa, he had lived a very dissolute life in France. And then when he studied Islam, he came upon the descriptions of paradise and he thought, well, this can't be the truth, because I've experienced the pleasures of the flesh, and I know that that's not what satisfies the longing of the human soul. It's not the highest good. There is more beyond that. And even Miles Davis, the great jazz man, in 1975, he stopped performing. And if you read his autobiography, all he did for 5 years was sleep with an endless succession of women and take a lot of drugs. And then he says, and then he started performing it again. In his autobiography, he says, I got bored. It was all the same every day. And he describes it in rather graphic terms. But the point is, that's not what the soul longs for, ultimately. And so this heavenly bordello.
Even Wilt Chamberlain.
Oh, yeah.
Chamberlain famously, supposedly had sex with 20,000 women, and
all at once.
No, over the course of many years, and that wasn't based on like counting them all up or anything like that. A guy basically followed him around a couple weeks, calculated how many women he had sex with, and then said, how long has this been going on? And Wilt Chamberlain told him how many years, and he said, this is basically average. So the guy sort of calculated 20,000. But Wilt Chamberlain, when he was older, said that once he got old, he said he realized that it would be better to have sex with one woman that you love 20,000 times than 20,000 different women that you don't really know. So that was cool. I have to point out, we did from Carol B have a viable alternative hypothesis for the stripping the clothes off. She said, maybe
I missed that.
She said maybe they're setting up an insanity defense. So we have my hypothesis, which is just way more intimidating to see a naked person coming at you. Your hypothesis that they're preparing for paradise, and then that does make for a good insanity defense. If you want to go off and say, no, I was sorry, I snapped, I was out of my mind. Well, stripping off your clothes would be good way to go about that, I think.
Okay, so David, speaking of nudity, we've got a story out of Britain involving a man named Adil Butt, and he stabbed his wife. Actually, where did he stab her, David?
I can't even say it anymore. My vocal cords are getting worn out from saying it over and over, so I'll just point.
Yes, that's correct. 27 times in the neck in front of their children. And miraculously, she seems to have survived this, and none of the wounds seem to have been fatal. I don't know what happened there. Yeah, I know. It's an astonishing story, really. But
the only blade I had around was a fingernail clipper.
Yeah, maybe. But even that, I mean, the neck is just 27 wounds in the neck. My goodness. In any case, this, of course, comes from a culture that allows for violence, particularly violence against women, the approval of wife beating. People say, well, of course, Islam does not allow you to kill or attempt to kill your wife. And that's certainly true. But the problem is, once you allow beating, and even if you say it has to be lightly, that's a subjective judgment. And it's easy to get carried away. And this is, I think, a quintessential example of that. Interesting story out of Chad, since there's a certain indeterminacy in a lot of our discussion tonight, David. I think it's worthwhile bringing this up. Just as we can't be sure what is going on in those cases we discussed about the the people stripping off their clothes. I saw this strange story out of Chad, and maybe you can shed some light on it. Did you see this? Women who refuse marriage proposals in northern Chad, in the town of Mangalme, will now have to pay £30 it's a fine for refusing to get married. Men, if they refuse a marriage proposal, will have to pay £12. And the Higher Islamic Council in Mangalme says that this fine, which is known as an amhilini, is based on the Quran and follows Sharia. Now, I thought, based on the Quran, I've read the Quran a million times, and I don't remember a fine for rejecting a marriage proposal. And I can't imagine. I looked for all the stories, and I did not find any story that specified what Quran passage they think allows them to levy a fine for rejecting a marriage proposal. And I wondered if you had any ideas.
Nope.
So here we go. This week in Strange Jihad. That's what we've got.
But they do have some different Qurans in Africa. I have to point that out. Maybe it's one of the different Kirat over there.
Maybe that's true. That's very possible. You just never know these days. There's so many Qurans. We'll have to get Yasser Qadi to look into that. Anyway, yes. Let's see. So many things. In Pakistan, there was a politician who offered $20 million for Geert Wilders to be killed after the the stabbing of Salman Rushdie. This is Rehan M. Sabir, who says that he is an engineer and a politician in Pakistan. And he wrote on Twitter, after the attack of Salman Rushdie, inshallah, the next number is Geert Wilders. Anyone from the world, give the head of Geert Wilders, I will give $20 million. I want Geert Wilders' head. We want head. All Muslims want head. So that's what he said. He was suspended from Twitter. But it's also interesting to note that J.K. Rowling, the famed novelist of the Harry Potter books, also was told by another Muslim that she was next and has appealed to authorities for help. And I thought, now that's strange. I can understand Wilders because he has criticized the Quran, and he spoke at our Muhammad art exhibit and cartoon contest and so on. He's made films criticizing Islam and the Quran. Quote a very important short film, as a matter of fact, Fitna, that very simply quotes Quran and then shows people acting in exactly the way that the Quran directs. Very simple, but of course that's very serious blasphemy. So what is it about J.K. Rowling that would get her on this list?
Yeah, I mean, maybe because she, talks about wizards and stuff like that, or
that's a good.
I don't know, but it's weird how like after there's an attack on Salman Rushdie, it's weird how many of these guys online think, aha, now's our chance to scare everyone into not talking about Islam. And they're not realizing kind of having the opposite effect on lots of people, that it makes them want to talk about it more, especially people like us. But the problem is that there's no consistency. They just run around and say the same thing to everyone. You're next.
Yes.
They run to everyone, you're next.
I did have a guy on. Yes, there's going to have to be a line. We're going to have to get issued numbers or something, because, that was a guy on Twitter telling me that my price would be set soon, and I'm looking forward to that, because if Wilders gets $20 million, I don't really think I can command that kind of money, but we'll see how much they put up for it.
I have to say though, they're not really helping their case or being as intimidating as they think, because I mean, you had Salman Rushdie, and that was like the one public guy back then who achieved global attention for this, and he runs around the world for another what, 35 years or so?
33 years.
So, I mean, not from the fatwa, from the, let's see, from, is it 88? Okay, so
Yeah, the
34.
Satanic Verses is right before
Yeah.
the
So he
fatwa.
publishes the Satanic Verses. 34 years later, they stab him, and he's an old man. He's 75 years old, and they still don't get him. They still don't get him, and they're going to make him even more popular than ever. So I'm sitting here thinking, okay, they say they're going to get me. They say they're going to get Robert. They say, okay, when? Like 35 years from now?
I
My
won't be
goodness.
around to see it.
I'll hand myself over. I'll be so old. And guys, I'll come to you. If I get to 75 years old, I'll come to you to let you finish the job that nature started.
Well, that's an interesting question, David. Allah obviously wants Geert Wilders, not Geert Wilders. Allah obviously wants Salman Rushdie alive. He didn't allow this jihadi to kill the guy. And he only allowed him to be attacked 34 years later. What's up with that? Wouldn't that make you question? Yes? You're getting a
I just
revelation?
got an awesome idea for a video. I just got an awesome idea for a video. I have to say it so I don't forget it. But comparing the woman who wanted to kill Muhammad with the guy who wanted to kill Salman Rushdie.
Oh,
right?
that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So a woman poisoned Muhammad, and he eventually dies from it. And these guys try to kill Salman Rushdie for years, and he's still walking around. So the point is, if we're supposed to draw a lesson about Allah's, finally getting the punishment on Salman Rushdie, my goodness, we have a much more interesting conclusion to draw about Muhammad, who apparently was much easier to poison and kill than old Rushdie. I mean, what did Rushdie get? He's been boning models for decades now. And then he goes on Curb Your Enthusiasm, and he's bragging about how the fatwa gets you the most ladies. If you get a fatwa on your head, he says all these hot ladies want you because you're such a dangerous guy. Now he's going to be going around with an eye patch like a pirate, and my goodness, this guy's gonna marry like a Kardashian or something next.
I think it's almost certain. All right, Australia. 63-year-old man. I find this baffling. 63-year-old Ali Rashid Amoon goes to the Canberra airport in Australia, fires a revolver into the airport window panes by the check-in counters. 5 bullets into the glass windows. Now, I thought, what on earth? You're 63 years old. I'm 60 now. So in 3 years, imagine I get up, I go to the airport, and I start shooting a gun into the windows. What on earth is that all about? What is this man thinking? And of course, it just happens that he is a Muslim. And I had to wonder, is he trying to strike terror in the enemies of Allah? He's getting old. He's not likely to be able to stab or kill somebody. So he figures, well, if I strike a little terror in the enemies of Allah at the airport, maybe Allah will count that in my favor. At least he didn't strip. That's one thing we can be glad about.
Yeah, but you've noticed that these things become patterns over time, right? Like as soon as one person came up with the idea of vehicular jihad, I'll just get in a vehicle and smash them into a crowd. Then all of a sudden it was happening like over and over again. Everyone's jumping in a SUV or a truck or something like this and plowing into a crowd. Well, now all of a sudden we might hear about all these naked jihadis prancing around butt naked, attacking people and screaming Allahu Akbar.
Now in Liberia, during the Civil War, the very bloody and evil Civil War back in the 80s and 90s, General Butt Naked led his troops into battle naked because he thought that they had some kind of special occult power to withstand bullets if they were naked.
I've always wanted to make a video about General Butt Naked. I think he's like one of the redemption stories. Like he eventually renounced.
I think so. Yeah.
Guys, he's not making that. That's what the guy's called. He's called General Butt Naked because he had some weird cult practices where he believed that you couldn't touch him or something like that. He'd be invincible if he ran into battle butt naked, and so he went in all these battles massacring people butt naked.
All his troops did too, if I recall correctly.
That's see, that confirms my theory. You don't want a butt naked dude running at you.
Well, there you
or
go.
anything.
So maybe it's all about striking terror in the enemies of Allah. Meanwhile, some unusual jihad stories. Well, I think the Australia one was pretty unusual to start with. This is a very unusual week for jihad, really, all around. Another one. Oh, now I've lost it. It'll come back. Uh, just had it. Excuse me. Oh, yeah, Twitter. This guy, Ahmad Abuamo. And he is a Twitter employee who ends up funneling information on Twitter users to the Saudis. And they give him a luxury watch worth $42,000 and all kinds of other things, apparently. And he was convicted of failing to register as a foreign agent, wire fraud, money laundering, and other charges. And I suspect that his willingness to deal with the Saudis had more to do, not just to do, that is, with luxury watches, but with a certain sense of loyalty to Islam itself, which, of course, Muslims are constantly told transcend all other loyalties. Dumb Infidel story out of Canada. We have an anti-racism consultant named Laith Marouf, who said, "Life is too short for shoes with laces or for entertaining Jewish white supremacists with anything but a bullet to the head." And he also referred to these Jewish white supremacists as loudmouthed bags of human feces, saying that they are slaves, he didn't say slaves, of their Christian white supremacist masters. Now, this guy is an anti-racism consultant. And so it's clear that here again, the dumb infidels don't realize the depth of anti-Semitism within Islam. And so they assume that this guy is going to be a perfectly reasonable official, and they don't understand when he starts venting in this manner.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised the New York Times hasn't hired him.
Yeah, I have a story like that. The New York Times had a stringer that he was released this week. He was in Gaza, Fadi Hanona. And Fadi Hanona said, "I don't accept a Jew, Israeli, or Zionist, or anyone else who speaks Hebrew. I'm with killing them wherever they are." Gee, where did he get that idea? Kill them wherever you find them. Where have I heard that?
Oh.
Children, elderly people, and soldiers. The Jews are the sons of the dogs. Oh, he's got to read his Quran more. It's not dogs, it's apes and pigs. I am in favor of killing them and burning them like Hitler did. I will be so happy. He got a job with the New York Times. He also worked for, at various points, the BBC, The Guardian, and Vice News, because their views really don't differ all that much from his. We have another dumb infidel story out of Britain, where 7,000 Afghan refugees are actually 9,500 are now being housed in hotels in the UK. And the Home Office is looking for permanent accommodation for them. And so they sent a lot of these guys to Scotland and Wales. However, the refugees rejected the housing they were offered in Scotland and Wales. And they said it's too cold and they don't speak English. And I thought, now that's just bad form, to be so ungrateful as to be brought halfway across the world out of a dangerous area, given all this free stuff, and you say, no, it's not good enough. I want more.
Have you heard of Ilhan Omar, Robert?
Golly, that does sound familiar. A very familiar name. But of course, it comes from...
Took her out of a refugee camp, made her a congresswoman, and it's like the most evil country in the world, her.
Yeah. But it comes from a particular sense of entitlement that comes from chapter 9, verse 29 of the Quran, which says that the Muslims must fight against the people of the book until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. So see, it's the natural order of things that the non-Muslims pay for the upkeep of the Muslims. And if they don't come across well enough, then the Muslims demand more. Because this is the way things ought to be. It's not a matter of gratitude. It's a matter of the natural order of things. Non-Muslims work. Muslims enjoy the fruit of their labors. That's the way Allah planned it.
No, indeed.
Exactly. All right. What else do we have here? Let's see.
Oh, did you hear about? I mean, I haven't looked into it, but I saw the story. That guy, where was it, in New Mexico, who started going around killing Muslims, and everyone was saying it was going to be a white supremacist
Yeah.
or a Hindu nationalist, and it turned out to be a Sunni Muslim killing Shia Muslims.
Yes.
But then I just saw that they detained his son as possibly being part of it, because his son kept lying. That they were asking him, "Hey, were you around when he was getting these guns?" No, 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 no. It turns out he was. He was there when his dad was getting guns, and his son was at least in the area of two of the attacks and so on. So they're like, "Wait a minute, maybe this is a family affair here." And isn't that weird? Because it's the same thing with the grooming gangs. You look at the names when they finally released the names in these grooming gang trials, and it would be like father and his brother and three sons and 8 of their cousins all gang raping some girl, which, I mean, that means it's not something you need to keep secret within the family. It's like perfectly acceptable. So, I mean, think if it's like father and son, let's go kill some Shias. That's not something that, like, a guy's trying to cover up and hide. It's like, hey, we understand in this family that is something that's perfectly acceptable. And so just like with the grooming gangs, it's, hey, as long as the 11-year-old we're gang raping is an unbeliever, it's totally acceptable for us. And so it would be a family affair.
Mm-hmm. And another thing about Muhammad Syed out of New Mexico, I actually have a story here where people in the Muslim community are shocked in Albuquerque. And this one guy says, for months, this guy was praying next to other members of the community as if everything was normal. It shocks you. And another one says, the suspect is well known in the Muslim community. And I thought, wait a minute, he's well known in the Muslim community? He's praying right next to them? We're constantly told that these people are indeed a tiny minority of extremists. They have no relationship to genuine Islam, and consequently people in the mosques would put them out because they are representing Islam in a false manner. And so then we hear this guy is active in his mosque and everybody knows him, and they find out then that he's going around killing Shia. Well, it seems to me to be perfectly reasonable, because he is acting upon the death penalty for heresy and apostasy. And consequently, he is acting in accord with Islam. And there's nothing that they're saying in the mosque that is going to contradict what he's done.
And he's following the example of the greatest generation of Muslims, the first generation, who started attacking each other and calling each other heretics and apostates over pretty much anything.
Indeed. No, indeed. All right, out of Afghanistan, there was a Muslim cleric who was murdered this week by somebody who got close to him at the seminary, in an Islamic seminary. And he was able to get close enough to him in the Islamic seminary by hiding explosives in his artificial leg. And this story reminded me of Muhammad Maslama getting close to Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf and saying, gee, your cologne smells terrific. Can I get a little closer and smell that? And the Cobb says, sure, buddy, because they're all friends now. And then he gets close enough to kill him. And of course, war is deceit. So it's not in the least surprising that this cleric would have been killed by somebody who thinks he's a heretic and an apostate who deceived him enough to get close enough. And I guess it's a good thing he lost his leg, so he had the artificial leg that he could hide the explosives in. Allah is the best of schemers.
Certainly has come up with some great schemes. Hey, let me smell you. Let me smell you. Ah.
All right, well, here it is. An hour has gone by. It feels like 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. We are likely to be back here next week because, unfortunately, I think that probably nothing is more certain than that there will be a spate of jihad attacks this week around the world. And so, unless they get us, we will be here to discuss them. Thank you very much, and good night, and God bless. How do you hang this thing up, David? Oh, there it is. Good night, everyone.